Welcome, and thank you for joining us. This evening, we have former Governor Gary Johnson joining us. He's a two-term governor of New Mexico who was able to turn their deficit back into a financial asset to the state. He is currently running under the Libertarian ticket for president after withdrawing from the Republican nomination. He is a big supporter of cannabis for social and medical uses, and also for hemp for industrial use. We will be discussing our families, education, medical cannabis use, and Gary Johnson's own experience with his accidents in cannabis. Family communication seems to be a very important component of your position on cannabis for social use as well as medical use. Being a father, what are the dynamics that you feel are critical to bring up in a conversation with your son or daughter? Obviously, your son's a lot older here, but if it were just any parent speaking to their son or daughter, considering that the children nowadays are confronted with the DARE program and their teachers and so on and so forth in school, where's the separation between school and family in that situation?
Well, when I launched into looking at the war on drugs and when I advocated legalizing marijuana in New Mexico, Eric was 18 years old, and Eric said, "Hey man, help me understand what you're saying." And we had a 3-hour conversation regarding drugs, and what I wanted Eric to know is that first and foremost that I love him and his sister, and that it would be naive of me to think that they wouldn't use illegal drugs. Now, illegal drugs, what's the problem with illegal drugs? Well, first, quality, quantity unknown. You have no idea what it is that you're using. And then secondly, if that's not an issue, then you're up against the criminal justice system when you use this stuff. But I would still be naive to think that my kids might not use or try illegal drugs, marijuana. So what I wanted to make clear to both of them was that first and foremost, I loved both of them. First and foremost, period. And that if they found themselves in a situation where they had used illegal drugs or alcohol or whatever substance and found themselves impaired, I wanted them to call me, to have me come pick them up, no questions asked, because I love them. And so the implications of that is that families do face issues with drug use, marijuana. And a lot of families don't want their kids smoking marijuana. Well, that's okay. But the reality is, half of the graduating class of the year 2012 did illegal drugs. Actually, looking ahead here to the graduating class, half of them are going to end up having used illegal drugs, marijuana. Do we really want half of our kids subject to the criminal justice system? Because that's exactly what we're looking at if the law is implemented to its fullest extent.
Right, and those are serious consequences. I myself was facing prison for cannabis possession about 3 years ago. I wasn't a kid, but it's still just as frightening.
When I came out espousing legalizing marijuana, I was absolutely blown away by how many leading citizens in New Mexico came to see me to tell me about their arrest records and their prior drug convictions. Stalwarts of the community that had been subject to the criminal justice system.
The one thing I find very amazing to myself over the last couple of years is to really learn who in our population does use cannabis, and it's all of us.
It's everyone. It's everyone. And if I'm one of the 100 million Americans who have smoked marijuana, and but for the wrong set of circumstances, I would be behind bars myself.
Right. Thank you very much for answering that. That's a critical issue to me, because I have a son who's growing up, and I have these same issues to confront. I feel that being very open about these topics is the first and foremost
So I gave
place to start from.
I gave a presentation at a high school in Albuquerque my final year in office, and there was a parent who took a very highly publicized Johnson is so wrong to be out promoting drug use. And my press secretary, who was at the event, she said, was it the 28 times that Governor Johnson said don't do drugs? And what was objectionable about well, first off, he talked about not doing drugs 28 times, and then he coupled that 8 times with the fact that he didn't want to see any of those kids in jail for what by many would classify as a bad decision.
And unfortunately, it's more than jail nowadays. It takes away our opportunity for financial aid for schools, potential applications for jobs, and so on and so forth down the road.
It does, and I've always maintained that marijuana is safer than alcohol. I've always maintained that by legalizing marijuana, we would actually have less overall substance abuse because marijuana would be a much safer alternative than alcohol for a lot of people.
And that's actually one of the reasons I have marijuana is safer here from Steve Fox and Paul and Mason, which refers to the press conference that you had yesterday in your support of treating marijuana like alcohol with that regulatory system.
I think Colorado has the opportunity here to change drug policy nationwide and subsequently worldwide. And that's a big opportunity.
Everybody's watching at this point. It's pretty amazing.
Everybody's watching, and because people are watching, it gets talked about. And the more people talk about this issue, the better the issue does. It's not an issue. In 1999, 30% of Americans supported legalizing marijuana. Today, 50% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. Which direction is that trend moving, and which direction does that trend continue to move in, and why does it do that? Why is it moving in that direction? It's because people are talking about it. People are understanding the issue better, and that's all good. So even if the Colorado initiative falls short, it's going to bring about a lot more awareness, and that 50% is going to continue to build.
On the other side of the coin is the hemp uses for cannabis. And so not only medical use, but we also have all the industrial uses and so on and so forth. So to date, we have about 31 states who have introduced a hemp bill or legislation, and 6 states have passed hemp study bills. Currently, Colorado has a hemp bill I helped author. It was HB 12-1099. I know New Mexico also has HB 62, which I read in detail last night, and I found that very interesting because it talks about using Xanthica, which is actually a variety of hemp, and nowhere in that document does it actually say hemp. So in any case, what we see is there's a lot of momentum. It's coming from all sorts of states and at all different levels. My question is really, considering the DEA's stance on this, that they can't differentiate industrial hemp or medical hemp or recreational hemp, and they're the only ones who seem to be against this. When we take into account the 10th Amendment and states' rights, what do you see as a path to move towards so that we can address the fears of the DEA?
Well, first of all, I think that hemp use, growing it, using it, is just a no-brainer. And I think that the roots of it being banned is, of course, marijuana prohibition. And legalizing marijuana, I just think this is another one of those no-brainers that, well, of course, we should allow and promote hemp growth and use.
What do you think the tipping point's going to be for the DEA? Is it going to be 25 states or 50 states, 40 states? Is it going to be something else that happens?
I'm gonna offer up that one state provides the tipping point. That when one state falls, it's going to be a domino effect, and everyone is going to quickly follow suit. I think we saw the same thing with alcohol prohibition, and the fact that my understanding is the first domino that fell was New York by telling the federal government we're no longer going to enforce federal alcohol prohibition laws. You can enforce them all you want, and that was the first domino. The
tipping point, if you will.
That was the tipping point.
It's an exciting place to be right now, being close to that tipping point.
It is, and all, at least for myself, I graduated from high school in 1971. I have to say, Jason, 40 years later, I did not think this was going to be an issue. I thought this was going to long have been taken care of.
I hear that from a lot of people, yeah.
And it still hasn't been, and, well, I don't want to go to my grave thinking that I coulda, shoulda, woulda on anything, but certainly this issue.
Well, your speaking out is, like you said earlier, it's a key piece, and every one of us who does that is contributing to the bigger picture, and we will accomplish this, I think.
Yes, we will.
We both have a lot of sports interests.
I see that, yeah.
I was a big skier. I was a telemark skier, snowboarder. I taught handicap skiing for many years, and that's where I actually had my accident. I was into paragliding. I enjoy flying large kites. I've got a 10-meter kite that is a blast to take out in the snow, and sometimes I'll sit my son in my lap and we'll slide around in the snow and slid around. But I understand that you had a couple accidents also, and so tying this into pain mitigation specifically, how did you mitigate your pain with prescription medication?
Well, so I had a horrible paragliding accident 6 years ago. And I had a burst fracture of my 12th T vertebrae.
Wow.
I had meniscus damage in both knees. I separated my ACL. I had 6 broken ribs.
Wow.
And prognosis for me was that I had, first of all, that I was never going to recover.
Mm-hmm.
That this was the end of physical activity as I knew it. And then secondly was the fact that I was supposed to lay on the floor for 6 weeks for my back to gain stability. Well, that was on the floor, eating, sleeping, with the exception of going to the bathroom. And I was prescribed painkillers, which I have used on a handful of occasions before in my life, and I've hated it every time I've used painkillers. The painkillers for me has resulted in worse consequences when I go off the painkillers than the pain that they relieved while I was on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just an avowed no painkiller. I think there's some real problems with painkillers. Anyway, I find myself with looking at 6 weeks on the floor, and a friend came by at that point and said, "Gary, could I get you some marijuana to deal with this?" And I thought, what a great idea, that would help me out a lot. And so it took me 3 years to recover from that accident, but I completely recovered from the accident, and I think marijuana played a key in helping me out, helping me through all that.
What made you so positive about using it in the first place?
Well, I grew up smoking marijuana. It's something that I did. I really understand marijuana. I stopped smoking marijuana all the time because I found it to be an impairment. But that should be a person's choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm familiar certainly with marijuana use, and when that happened, I just thought that it perhaps would really help me out a lot, and it did.
So would you use it again if you ever put in that situation?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
But you've learned to step away from it and see that it does have a very specific use.
Well, it does have a specific use, and another thing I'll share with you right now is that I was a child insomniac. I grew up as an insomniac. I could not sleep. There's too many things on my mind. When I smoked marijuana the first time when I was 18, that turned off the insomniac switch. And I'm not saying I smoked marijuana, I could sleep. I'm talking about I smoked marijuana one time, and it turned off the insomniac switch.
Wow. That's impressive. I've never heard that before. I'm starting to learn a little bit more about how cannabis affects sleep.
I talked to someone in neurosciences in New York a couple of weeks ago and told that to him, and he actually gave me the scientific explanation for why that actually did happen.
It makes sense in terms of, I understand that our brains are very plastic and that they can be changed very rapidly. So aside from the specifics, do you know the specifics? Would you be able to share that? Or?
Well, very. I'm really speaking with a broad brush.
Of course.
But the notion that there's a certain amount of activity in your brain, and that activity in insomniacs overcomes everything else, and that smoking marijuana softens that to the point that that you could actually cause that imbalance or balance one time, and once that balance got established, it would stay that way.
It's kind of like plugging the extension cord in somewhere. So tying into our medical system, considering physicians in America tend to be put on a pedestal, and a lot of people tend to do what their doctors tell them. What are some of your ideas that you may have about educating the public that there are other health options like acupuncture, cannabis? I understand your son is also pursuing a career in Oriental medicine. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And so how do you think we can go about empowering the people to understand that it's our choice?
You know, I think that I think there is a wellness component that so many of us are aware of, and so many of us are not aware of. What we eat, our physical activity, the combination of the two, our mental well-being. I think the country right now is at a crossroads here with regard to alternatives, and the alternatives are exciting, really exciting, a lot less costly and more effective. So in my own life, I really feel like I've achieved that balance, if you will, and I think there's opportunity for that message to resonate with millions of Americans that it currently doesn't resonate with. There's a reason you take antacid tablets, meaning there isn't actually a reason to take antacid tablets. You ought to take the fact that you have gas for changing your eating habits.
Right. Let's go back to the root of the problem here.
The fact that you're taking Tylenol for headaches, and please, I realize this is I am speaking here with a broad brush because so many do have issues that only Western drugs do actually impact.
There's
and
definitely
help.
an appropriate place.
There is a place for everything, but as a whole, I think Americans take too many medications. We take medications for nasal congestion. Well, there's a reason for nasal congestion. And rather than take the congestion medicine and breathe, shouldn't we actually be looking at root causes? Anti-reflux medication. If anti-reflux medication did not exist, when you experience reflux, you would stop whatever it is that causes that, whether it was drinking too much wine or eating something that you shouldn't have eaten. Well, now we have anti-reflux medication, so those habits go unchanged, and that may actually be a cause of other more serious side effects.
And of course, this is all speaking from a patient's perspective and our own experience. Not being a physician, it's hard to really get at the details. But as an observer, of course, we live in our own bodies, we notice these changes. And I think those of us who have gone down these paths of some alternative approach to healing, that we feel the difference. And so that raises a question. It's kind of like, for me, the gateway experience with marijuana. When I tried marijuana, I didn't want to try other drugs, but I asked the question, what else are they not, the institutions, if you will, not telling me, because cannabis wasn't as harmful. So
yeah, right. I went to the doctor once because I had this real pain in my arm when I lifted weights a certain way.
Did he tell you just don't do that?
He did, and it was profound. And it was profound because that's exactly what he should have said. And if you could just relate that experience to the rest of our lives and what we do in our own lives, and that we're not paying attention to what our own bodies are telling us, then...
Education has been a major topic of conversation in our country for a long time. And it's interesting that we spend so much money on our school system, yet it appears as though the educational literacy rate seems to be dropping. From my research, it appears that in World War I, we had about a 98% literacy rate at a sixth grade reading level. And today, it is about 40% of the country is capable of reading above a fourth grade reading level. So looking at the bigger picture here, what do you see are some solutions to these problems?
Well, the bigger picture, that we should have alternatives. We have a one-size-fits-all, and really that's what we have. Now, we do have private educational opportunities that even people that don't have a lot of money take advantage of, because there are those choices. So, as governor of New Mexico, I promoted bringing competition to public education and advocated school vouchers, which I think would have done that. I just think that there are so many wonderful alternatives to education than showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, chained, if you will, to a desk, which is the situation for a lot of kids. That if you had alternatives to what is currently a one-size-fits-all, that I think we would all benefit from that.
That's a great answer. That's something I've noticed. We tend to cater to the lowest denominator, unfortunately, in classrooms. We
cater to the lowest denominator, and if we had school choice, I think there would be an entire enterprise devoted to those that are on the lowest rung, if you will, to implement methods that currently can't be used because everyone's in the same classroom, as opposed to segregating out kids with special needs. We're all special. We all have different. We all have different needs, and there are different ways to address those needs.
Do you see that as something that's economically viable?
Well, very, very economically viable. It's beyond economically viable. It would save trillions of dollars. It's literally saved trillions of dollars. Right now, there's home educate. You can educate yourself on the computer with, is it the Khan Institute? You can educate yourself all the way through college, utilizing the computer for no cost. Implementing those your computer interaction with human interaction that can come to play, and very effective for a lot less money. And I am talking now about programs that do exist in the country that have been very successful doing just that kind of thing. In the context of this question, the best thing that the federal government could do when it comes to education is to abolish the Federal Department of Education. The Federal Department of Education gives each state about 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached.
Right.
What we don't understand is it's a negative to take federal educational dollars. Abolish the Federal Department of Education, give education back to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and that's exactly what you'll have. You'll have some fabulous success that will get emulated by other states because we're so competitive. You'll also have some horrible failure that will get avoided for the same reason. We're very competitive, and why would we want to duplicate a failure that Wisconsin may have implemented?
Right, we can learn from each other on that one.
But 50 laboratories working on that is a far superior system than Washington knows best, Washington top down, which since its implementation in 1979, I don't think people realize the Department of Education
is really
new. And if you look at educational performance relative to the establishment of the Federal Department of Education, they seem to be in tandem.
Interesting. I'm going to have to start poking into that data. I haven't looked in that.
Jimmy Carter established the Department of Education.
Of all people.
Of all people. That and the Department of Energy.
Department of Energy, really?
Yes.
How do they fit in?
How do they fit in? Aren't they? They're supposed to make us energy independent. I can't think of really anything that's come out of the Department of Energy that. Don't get me wrong. If you look at the green space is getting more efficient, but it's not anywhere close to where it needs to be economically viable. Abolish, get the federal government out of that business, and that business will improve dramatically.
So can I assume that you would feel the same way about the Federal Reserve? I know that's sort of a totally different topic, but...
Well, I would abolish the Federal Reserve if given the opportunity. What we need to do is stop printing money.
Right.
We need strong U.S. dollar policies as opposed to weak U.S. dollar policies. If we abolish the Federal Reserve tomorrow, the Treasury could and would still print money because they would have to do that. They printed money before there was ever a central bank, and in other countries where there's no central bank, they print money. But that's what we need to stop. So we need to balance the federal budget. We need to promote savings. So I'm advocating the fair tax, which will promote savings. And it's one thing to borrow money. That's okay. It's another thing to print money. That's what we need to stop. And we need to balance the budget and then embark on actually paying back the $15 trillion in debt that we've racked up.
Well, thank you very much, Gary Johnson. I appreciate you coming this evening, and hopefully we'll have you back.
Good. I'm going to hold you to that.
All
Jason,
right.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your being a terrific advocate for a whole bunch of different.
Thank you for
Different
that.
issues.
I appreciate that. That was it's still confusing to me how many things I have my hands in. So thanks again, and we'll catch up with you down the road with our next video. Thank you very much.